Well, Vanessa and I recorded another episode of the Syria podcast at the weekend, and that went up on the UK Column website. If you haven't heard that yet, please do go and listen to it. But in the course of that recording, Vanessa, you mentioned a private security company which you didn't name at the time. So let's name it now.
Well, yes. And I hasten to also say that in addition to the podcast, there will be a series of articles that I'm writing, published at UK Column, going into greater detail into this organization and its potential practices in Syria. But the name of the company is Emerald Syria, part of the Emerald Group. It's based in Dubai in the UAE, but it is effectively staffed predominantly, as always, with many of these PMCs, private military companies or private military security companies, by former British military, and this is no exception. So basically, there were two articles published, one in Online Intelligence, another in Turkish media, which is this one. UAE Group launches security firms in Syria after Assad's fall. So let's have a quick look at the logo up at their Instagram. We are excited to announce the establishment of our new company, Emerald Solutions Syria, dedicated to providing exceptional services in Syria, which, according to them, it includes the protection of media outlets operating in Syria. And then within the article itself, it explains a little bit more about how Emerald got established in Syria. If we can just have a look at this. So what it talks about is the fact that Emerald has clients already that are being housed in fortified villas in Damascus and protected by local forces. One assumes that's members of the HTS unelected government, effectively Al-Qaeda. They entered Damascus, and this is interesting, on the day of the fall of Damascus. So on the 8th of December, which of course is the day that I managed to get out of Damascus. And that was, according to them, in order to work with international media covering the historic events. They were registered apparently in Syria officially on March the 11th, 2025, which was facilitated by the then trade minister. He's now actually been replaced. Now, the head of operations in Syria is a Simon Ralton. If we can just have a quick look at his LinkedIn. So he's described as managing director of Emerald Solutions, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. And interestingly, I'm not going to go into massive detail, but Simon Ralton in particular was involved. This is him again. Emerald Solutions successfully repatriated Travis Timmerman from Syria, reuniting him safely with US forces at the Al Tanf illegal US military base on the border with Syria and Jordan. Now, just very quickly to cover the Travis Timmerman story, which is relatively interesting. He entered Syria, I would guess, about a year ago illegally. He was smuggled through the Lebanese border into Syria, and perhaps unsurprisingly, at a time when tourism was actually booming in Syria under the former Syrian government. He was arrested for entering illegally and without any papers or permissions. He claimed he was on a religious pilgrimage, and he was eventually found barefoot after all the prisons were opened up by the marauding Al-Qaeda gangs. And he was allegedly found by Emerald Solutions. And then with the help of Syria Emergency Task Force, which is another CIA-linked regime change-focused operation, he was taken to Al Tanf. So this suggests that Emerald was already well aware of the situation in Syria prior to the actual operation by HTS and in connection with another CIA operator in Syria itself. So I found that quite interesting as a story. And also, Ralton only joined Emerald Solutions in November 2024, so 1 month prior to the fall of Damascus. I'm sure that's also just coincidental. Looking at his LinkedIn profile, his first job in the PMC industry was with an organization called Aegis Defense Systems Limited, where he was from May 2007 until June 2010. Why have I focused on this? Because I think it demonstrates very clearly that the kind of internal structure of PMCs globally, and of course the majority of which are based in the UK. So let's have a look at who was basically the chairman of Aegis Defence when it was established in 2002, Lord Nicholas Soames, who you'll know better perhaps as an MP of Crawley and Sussex. He was the former chairman of Aegis Defence Services and member of the International Advisory Board for Garda World, who bought Aegis in 2015. So this shows very clearly a revolving door between this particular PMC and the British government and the House of Lords itself. And then who basically formed Aegis Defence? This is a guy, a maverick, who is Lieutenant Colonel Tim Spicer, given the OBE for his services, about his book, about the man who inspired 007. So he formed Aegis in 2002. Now, Aegis did not have a very good record in Iraq in particular. They were kind of hauled over the coals for employing former child soldiers as mercenaries in Iraq, child soldiers from Sierra Leone. And it was picked up that there was a very good reason, according to the Aegis directors, that they would use these former child soldiers from Sierra Leone because they were much cheaper than using British or European mercenaries. They were only paying them around $16 per day. But prior to forming Aegis, Spicer started another company called Sandline. This is their homepage formerly. It was taken down from the internet. They were formed in the early 1990s and were dogged by controversy. So again, Spicer involved in controversial events through his PMC. In 1997, Sandline, and this was known as the Sandline Affair, Sandline was hired to help put down a rebellion in Papua New Guinea, and the local army wasn't happy to find a PMC was brought in and paid more than the overall military budget. So the army launched a coup and overthrew the government in Papua New Guinea. This was written by Peter W. Singer, author of Corporate Warriors. But then if we move on, also in 1996 to 97, in 99, Tony Blair was involved in the Arms to Africa scandal, which was effectively, I'm going to describe it very shortly. In 1997, there was a coup that put Johnny Paul Koroma in power. However, the UK, EU, and US wanted to restore the previous government of President Kaba. In 97, the UN imposed an embargo on arms supply to Sierra Leone. And in 98, the supporters of Kaba, the former president, thought that they would employ Sandline International to overthrow Koroma, which meant that he was supplying, Spicer was supplying weapons, military equipment, and personnel. When he thought he was going to be rumbled, his solicitors sent a letter to the Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, implicating Foreign Office personnel and MOD officials and representatives of the then US administration, which then prompted Cook to initiate the Legg inquiry. And this is Paddy Ashdown basically speaking to Tony Blair whilst the government has been playing pass the parcel with the blame over this. The Sierra Leone rebels, who were defeated by British arms, have now been rearmed, apparently with the assistance of another British company. So again, I just want to show the background to perhaps Emerald Solutions in Syria and the staff that are actually working within that. And then again, coming back to Aegis, a UK firm awarded the largest Iraq security contract, so a 2-year contract, $475 million. They were also involved in the attack against Basra in 2003, replacing British troops at the behest of the then Basra governor. And there was, in 2005, video of an Aegis contractor firing wildly at civilian cars on the Iraqi highway to the tune of Mystery Train by Elvis Presley. And of course, we will remember the crimes committed by Blackwater and by CACI, who were accused of torturing prisoners under their detention and torturing them. So therefore, I think this just sets the scene for what PMCs might be up to in Syria.
Thank you, Vanessa. We'll come back to this topic a little bit later on. But in the meantime, if you like what the UK Column does, if you'd like to support us, support.ukcolumn.org is the place to go. You can make a donation. Join us as a member. If you do join us as a member, that will allow you to access UK Column News Extra and the forums and so on. You can support us by picking something up at the UK Column shop, or if you use the link on this page to buy something from clivedeclark.com, we do get a small commission from that. But if you can't do any of that, that's absolutely fine. Please do at least share anything that you see of interest on the UK Column website, because that helps us defeat the algorithms, and we absolutely need everybody to help us with that. But Charles, there is an item on the UK Column shop that we still would encourage people to get hold of.
Absolutely, there is indeed. I was wearing mine this morning, and it definitely put a spring in my step. The UK Column on location, I wasn't the only one listening from Cheltenham 2025, is now up on the website. So if you were there, or you watched the live stream, or you are about to watch the live stream, because that is also still for sale, then do get a t-shirt too.
Now, you interviewed Sam Sorbo.
I did, and that went out yesterday. It's been very well received. She speaks very, very passionately and from a very well-informed position on home education. And when one considers what Ben was reporting in the news on Monday's programme about the suggestion that the government are going to be able to inveigle their way into the lives of primary school children when it concerns issues about which they may or may not speak or have a particular view, then this really is one to listen to, not just for people with children, but for those who just have want to get a better idea of sort of how corrupt the system actually is and how it can be avoided.
And at 1 p.m. tomorrow, you interviewed Jeremy Nill. Germ warfare and battle of ideas is the topic. 1 p.m. tomorrow. Do not miss it. And there's a very good reason for not missing it, because Jerem is going to be providing us with a lot of content over the next coming weeks and months.
He is indeed. Yeah, we're very pleased to announce that starting on Monday, the 5th of May, he will be producing a show for UK Column under his Germ Warfare brand, and that will go out 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. And he will be resuming his consistently high quality service of interviewing fascinating people from all over the world about topics that we have all, I would say, reaped huge benefits from listening into to date. So we're really excited about that, to have him with UK Column. And the interview for tomorrow is not just to lead up to that, but also his background. He's been a cartoonist for a long time, having worked in the mainstream media, and to have come out the other side, and also his perspective as a South African living in a sort of broken country.
Okay, now just a quick reminder of Stand the Light taking place in Cumbria. That's in May Bank Holiday, 23rd to the 26th of May, 2025. Lots of hugely interesting people performing at that event, and a whole bunch of other activities for people. So do get along to that if you possibly can. Okay, now let's then, and looking at Emerald and similar companies, the question of regulation and how they're regulated, or if they're regulated, springs to mind.
Yeah, indeed. It's a very important question. So I'll start with a report from War on Want from 2008, so based largely on crimes that were committed by PMCs during the war against Iraq, the illegal war against Iraq, getting away with murder, the need for action on UK private military and security companies. So as they point out, tens of thousands of mercenaries working for PMCs outside legal control. The US and Iraq at the time were taking action. The UK government had failed to act despite, as we've mentioned, being the biggest player. And this is basically, again, repeated in various articles, but this is from Open Democracy in 2018. co-written by Dr. Ian Overton, who heads up the Action Against Armed Violence organisation, which tries to regulate PMCs to some degree. Britain is the World Centre for Private Military Contractors, and it's almost impossible to find out what they're up to. Welcome to the murky world of mercenaries and floating armories, so already setting the theme. And as part of the article points out, the British PMSC industry, the private military security company industry, Britain has basically led this privatization of modern warfare. It leads the world in providing armed contractors to so-called hotspots. And some of the biggest clients are governments in those hotspots. Since 2004, the UK government has spent approximately £50 million annually. The total worth of the PMC industry stands between 69 billion and 275 billion. So it's a very, very lucrative market sector. And then if we look at what Dr. Ian Overton actually says within that article, he said that AOAV had investigated 235 UK-based internationally operating PMSCs. So this is in 2018. These profit-seeking entities are entrusted with government security tasks, while themselves being subject to a perilously weak system of self-regulation. So again, we see, and I'll come on to who else is being self-regulatory shortly, but this is a response to Baroness Tong in 2021 during parliamentary questions, who basically asked Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon what legislation was in place to basically provide oversight for, as she said, UK citizens acting as mercenaries or training with foreign militaries. Let's see what Lord Ahmed said. First of all, he said, we draw a clear distinction between mercenaries and PSCs. We promote high standards for PSCs internationally through voluntary regulation of the sector. So we come back to this idea of voluntary regulation. And as I said, this was in 2021. He goes on to say members of UK armed forces regularly undertake training with a wide range of international actors, where this best supports the development of UK military capability. And this is important, supports wider government objectives. Well, why is this so important? Because if we look at another organization, which could be largely described as a PMC, is the White Helmets, which was established by a former British military intelligence officer, James Le Mesurier, in 2013, was almost exclusively embedded with al-Qaeda derivatives in Syria and has been accused by Syrian civilians of involvement in organ trafficking, child trafficking, and staging, of course, the famous chemical weapon events that basically sustained the regime change war narratives against the then Syrian government. They are also self-regulatory. They don't come under any investigation by UN agencies or even by the British government. That is effectively their primary funder. And then let's have a look again at Lord Ahmed. This was in 2019, talking about the White Helmets. The UK has provided 38 million from the Conflict Stability and Security Fund. We've talked about that many times on UK Column, to support the White Helmets over the past 5 years. This assistance delivered through trusted third-party implementers as part of a coordinated international program of assistance. And for sure, the White Helmets were furthering British Foreign Office objectives in Syria, which was effectively regime change. And then this is going to be part of the investigation that I will publish up at UK Column. It'll be a series of articles because there's a lot of information to trawl through. But let's have a look at the founder and executive director of Emerald Solutions Group. They were formed in 2012, 1 year before the White Helmets were put together by James Le Mesurier. As I said, he was a former British military intelligence operator. This is Wayne Christopher Connor. Now, what is seriously interesting about his LinkedIn profile is that to a large degree, you can see the crossover between him and James Le Mesurier's career. In 2007, he joined Olive Group, which you will remember, Mike, from the diagram we did way back about the White Helmet, that were then bought up by Blackwater and, bought up by Academy, who also incorporated Blackwater. And in 2007, James LeMessurier left Olive Group. So Wayne Connor was basically there prior to, he joined just as James LeMessurier was leaving. They also crossed paths in the Balkans and in other areas of operations. So very interesting, as I've said. The other self-regulatory group backed by the West and the UK, of course, is HTS itself, Al-Qaeda, that was commissioned to form a committee to investigate its own crimes of ethnic cleansing and atrocities committed against Syrian civilians since the takeover in December 2024. And of course, Israel is extremely self-regulatory. It looks into the crimes of genocide committed against Palestinians.
Thank you, Vanessa. Any brief thoughts on that?
Well, actually, just on that, in terms of UK column content, there's a very interesting interview with Morgan Lorette, who was in Iraq in 2003-4, working for Blackwater, subsequently joined the US Armed Forces. It's entitled Outsourcing Morality, up on the UK column website. So that would be my first response, would be to go and listen to that. It's very, very insightful.
Super, thank you. Sandy, let's bring you back to the programme then. And